We're very happy to have with us today Gregory Sgrulloni on the drums, aka This is Torch, someone who I'm so excited to talk to. Without him, I would probably not be on the road of being a jazz musician because I discovered his music about 20 years ago. He's a trap drummer. He's got a ton of books out. He's toured the world, and well, I just want to thank you for coming on today. So good to see you.
Yeah, man, likewise, and thanks for inviting me for your podcast.
Beautiful, beautiful. You know, you've done so much, and you've actually toured with one of my favorite guitarists, Chris Machete.
Oh, you know Chris?
Of course, well, he's one of my favorites. He used to be in a band called Rack that I used to idolize when I was in high school,
Okay.
and that's just one of the things you've done. So I guess the first thing I wanted to ask you, you've been on such a ride. I mean, you graduated from Berkeley, in around 2006, I think it was, something like that. So, we're coming up on 20 years or so, being professional, I guess you could say. What are you most grateful for at this point today?
That's a good question. I mean, honestly, I think I'm most grateful for just the people, the connections, the friends that I've, you know, um, accumulated or whatever over the years. Um, I mean, starting with Berkeley, a lot of my kind of lifelong friends came from that experience, that whole time there. People I still work with, today. Um, so that's probably the one thing I'm most grateful for, you
I
know.
mean, what we're doing, everyone has their own paths as an artist and musician. So we kind of like each define success in our own ways. I mean, and you've done so much. I've been keeping up with your career for a long time. So does success mean to you having gotten the chance to play with certain musicians that you've worked with or play in certain places? What do you think success would mean for you?
Well, honestly, I feel like that's gone through a couple of shifts throughout the whole timeline. Um, I think at first, yeah, I define that as, one day I'd love to perform with, so and so, or I'd love to work with so and so, and um, that's one goal, I guess. Other things would be like, obviously, I think a lot of people sort of define, success or whatever in this industry as getting certain accolades, certain credits, and maybe achieving a certain level, like financially, you know. Um, so, there's always, some of that, I think, in there. One thing that I feel like has been rolling around in my head for several years, though, is like legacy. Like if I were gonna die like tomorrow, you know, what did I leave behind that would make things just a little bit better in the world? You know what I mean? Um, Making more money doesn't do that for me. You know, Playing with a certain, artist may not fulfill that 100%, completely. Uh, so I'm thinking of things like, artistically, what do I want to do as an artist, and what can I contribute? Um, and then you mentioned books. So one of the things that I did was I wrote a book on trap style drumming, and yeah, to my knowledge, there wasn't that out there at the time, and there still isn't another one out there now. Besides that, so I've always been, I think, for as long as I can remember, uh, sort of fascinated with musicians or artists who not only are they great at what they do and are really prolific and artistic and all that great stuff, but they leave their mark. You know, when you think of the greats, and you can go down a whole list of them, you can usually point out like a thing. Like
I,
one
I I completely agree with you. And you mentioned legacy, which is something I don't, I don't know how many people, think about it in that way. And that's really interesting to hear you. Do you think about death a lot, and in the terms about relates to your art? I'm actually kind of curious. Like, does
uh,
it maybe motivate you a little bit? I need to push more or something.
well, I think, as you get older, you start thinking more about this stuff. I'm not thinking of it in like a morbid sense, you know. I'm not like shutting the lights off and staying in a corner in a dark room somewhere. I might die tomorrow, blah blah. No, nothing like
You're
that.
not that type of person, as far as I know.
No, 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 no. Um, but I don't. I guess I'm not sure where it comes from, but I do think of like, um, okay, this is the best way to put it. There's kind of the short-term way of thinking of things, and then there's really the long-term way of thinking of things. And when you're thinking short-term and you're being short-sighted about things, you're thinking about things like money, making that next paycheck, getting that next opportunity, getting that next whatever it is. And that's fine. But there's lots of smaller goals along the way that keep you kind of moving, you know?
Definitely.
But but you know, Quincy Jones pops into my head right now. I mean, here's a guy who's we're all sad that he died, but he left behind so much. You know what I mean? It's like, uh,
Unquestionably, unquestionably. And, that actually brings me to, we're talking about, you say that there wasn't a book about trap drumming, right? Was trap drumming kind of the place where, because I knew you as a jazz drummer originally, was that where you sort of felt like you found your own voice when you started investing into that style? Like, what was the moment where it's kind of like all clicked for you, like, oh, I finally have my own voice? Because we copy as we learn. But what was, do you remember there being a certain point where it's like you felt like I have my identity behind the instrument?
um, I do remember a very like distinct moment,
Yeah, what was that?
and it's not with the trap thing actually. And I was still living in Boston at the time, and I may have still been in classes. I may have actually still been going to school at that time, not graduated yet. But I remember like being on Newbury Street, and I think I had like a small apartment on Commonwealth at the time. So yeah, maybe this was after Berkeley. I don't know. It's like it's so long ago now. I it just
It's like a different lifetime ago.
all blurs together now. But
Yeah.
um, but yeah, I remember having like my headphones on and listening to a sound recording that that we had recorded. It was myself and the group that I work with, Sistine Criminals, which we're still kind of off and on. It's not so much a thing these days, but um, but we still have like little plans here and there to make some records, and we have the occasional gig here. But anyway, I'm walking around Newbury Street, and I think I'm just like heading home or something, and I'm listening to the sound recording, and it did sort of click for me at that moment because at that time, I guess I hadn't really heard anything kind of like that. Just in my my collection of CDs or whatever. CDs, we don't listen to that crap anymore.
I think I remember you used to have a CD, like a Discman, right?
I did, yes.
Yeah,
I
I
did, but
remember.
I also did have, an MP3 player. So that's also kind of some bygone technology. Like who needs an MP3 player
The
now?
MP3 player.
This is just everything. But your smartphone is everything. Um, but I remember I think it was called an Arcos, and it actually looked a little bit like a little like video game or something. It had like a screen in the middle and then just buttons on the side. It was that, and then you would use that to record just like jam sessions or rehearsals, and yeah, I was listening to it because that's what you do. You record and you listen to, you try to, maybe see how you can get better, or just critiquing and analyzing, your band and trying to improve on it. But I do remember that one time as I'm walking, on Newberry Street, and I'm like, this was when we were experimenting with drum and bass. And I'm saying these early recordings, I didn't even really have my chops together for this stuff because, yeah, I was like trying to be Jeff Tain Watts and Elvin Jones, and like those are the guys that I was trying to be. Um, so it was like my hands were all conditioned for that stuff, but they weren't really there completely. But you could hear like glimpses of what it was going to be. And I was like, maybe there is something out there, but I'm not hearing it yet, and it's not being heard, widely. I'm not hearing it coming out of anybody's, dorm room or, something like that. So I thought, hey, maybe this is kind of a fresh sort of sound. Um, you know, Playing these types of beats is it's nothing new because you have guys like Jojo Mayer and Johnny Rab, and the kind of the pioneers of that sort of playing. But it still wasn't really like, you didn't hear people just in practice rooms doing that stuff. So I guess I felt at that time that maybe it was just kind of new frontier. Not that I was doing anything special or new or anything, but maybe that I thought that maybe I stumbled upon an opportunity to carve a little path, for myself. I guess
No,
that's how I looked at it.
no, totally. And I mean, you mentioned Jeff Tain Watts, and you're talking about Commonwealth Street and Berkeley and all this stuff. And I was wondering, we receive advice from all sorts of people, and when we're younger, we can get discouraged from things people say to us, or we listen to someone's advice, like, because I'll tell you, I mean, the most valuable, I remember you told me that it's better to be great, exceptional in one style than to be mediocre in a lot of styles. And that really stuck with me. And I was kind of curious, like, did anyone give you any sort of advice that maybe you ignoring it was right, or you chose to redefine what they told you? Because your advice led me to a place where I'm at now. So I'm kind of wondering what came before that.
Hmm. Well, the thing that comes to mind is when I was taking lessons from Ralph Peterson. And I guess I don't know if it's necessarily advice, but I guess it was more like a moment where it was kind of a shift, and maybe it was advice, or maybe it was just me taking direction, and maybe he was like the guru in the room, and they're like, hey man, like you're ready for this like next step, basically. And that was at that time I was trying to be like Jeff Dane Watts. Like I didn't really have like a Torch or a Greg or whatever. I wasn't trying to be like anybody but other people, really. But I guess that's just the stage in learning the instrument. Um,
He wanted you to become more of yourself, you're saying?
that's yeah. So if I remember kind of what he said, I'm maybe paraphrasing this, but um, he's like, you sounding like really good playing like all these other guys. Like you sound like them, and that's great and everything. Um, but he's like, you got to stop being a Jeff Tain Watts and start being like a Greg, which to me didn't sound as badass. But
No,
uh,
I think I think he's totally right. I mean, it's otherwise you're just kind of copying, I suppose.
right,
Um, but
you gotta find your own thing. And um, the funny thing is, I had always been, um, what's the word? I guess I always, since maybe even like age 16 or 17 back in high school, I did have an interest or a fascination with like certain drummers and artists who had like a signature sound or recognizable sound where you can close your eyes, listen to them, and be like, oh yeah, that's Coltrane. Oh yeah, that's John Bonham.
You knew that about the individual voice thing when you were 16, you're saying.
Oh yeah, yeah. I was definitely tuned into that, and um, but see, but at that stage of learning the instrument, I was just trying to tap into what they were doing, and
Absolutely.
I think that's necessary. You have to imitate so that you can innovate. As the saying kind of goes.
Yeah.
Um,
I also wanted to ask you too, because you've been doing this for so long now, and you grew up learning how to play the instrument. Are there certain things about yourself that only come out when you're performing? Like you feel like you can only express yourself a certain way with the drums? Does that make sense?
oh yeah. Um, I think generally I've always been a pretty quiet and shy type of personality, especially back in high school. I mean, over the years I've opened up and gotten better with that. But I still have my social anxieties even now. I'm not very big on being around huge crowds of people and things like that. I'm not maybe not quite a hermit, but I'm
I
a
don't
humble.
like crowds of people either. I mean, that just sounds horrible.
Yeah, no, I think I was forced. So, and I stress the word forced to go to a fish concert. Okay, and I
Wait, you were forced to go to a fish concert?
oh, persuaded, forced. Like, oh, come on, man, come on.
You were in high school, you're saying, or is this later?
Well, this was later. This is when I was down in New York, and I had some friends in the scene who were like trying to convince me to like get into fish and all this stuff, and I still can't do it. But but I did. I went. There was like the one time I forget where it was, but it was at some kind of amphitheater, and I was just like, I can't, I can't do this. I can't do this. This is too much for me. And then, and then even worse, they were at Madison Square Garden, and yeah, I had like free tickets and everything. Like I didn't pay for any of this stuff because people really wanted to like, come on, man, you should check them out. And I'm telling you, I went into the Madison Square Garden. I walked in and I walked right out. I'm like, nope,
Yeah.
I'm not doing this.
Yeah, no, I mean, I kind of feel like that sometimes when I get on airplanes, but I have to force like, I could see myself turning around when you're on the going down the tunnel, but yeah, I totally understand. So, music playing the drums for you would you say it's like an escape from those
Well, I guess,
anxieties in a way?
no, I guess what I was getting at was that um, maybe the easiest way to put it is I'm leaning more to like an introverted sort of personality where like I kind of like to be on my own and work on stuff kind of, you know, behind closed doors under the radar, that sort of thing. But then if I do play drums, it's like almost polar opposite. I'm there to perform, and it's like you'd swear that I'd have this, louder personality.
It's almost like there's two different people in a way, right? But maybe the yin and the yang effect sort of
I,
thing happening.
I think so, and again, I think that was probably even more true back in high school, where I was like the quiet kid. You know what I mean? Uh, so quiet, in fact, that people would turn around and be like, "Hey, man, talk, say something." Like that's how quiet I was.
But without being that quiet, it wouldn't have led you to where you are today. And when you have to perform, and whether it's jazz or drum and bass, there it's about taking risk because there is improvising. What's the biggest risk you've ever think you've taken on a performance or maybe record anything come to mind when I ask you that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the one thing is it's not so much the playing of the drum kit, but when I start getting really crazy with electronics. So triggering and drum programming and automation and using Ableton and all that stuff, um, syncing computers and just a whole like mess of stuff because like anything can go wrong and oftentimes something does go wrong. So um, that yes, that is about as risky as you can go. I mean, outside of attempting some kind of complicated pattern or fill and then like flubbing it, you know, I'm less concerned about those sort of things. Um, I guess mostly because stylistically, I'm not much of a fill guy anyway. I tend to focus more on beat patterns and things like that. Uh, but yeah, like the second I start hooking this thing up to a computer and trying to do craziness with it, will it work? Will it work? I don't know. We'll see if we'll see what happens.
I also wanted to ask you too because you were influenced by these people like you named Jeff Tain Watts and Ralph and stuff. What's inspired you that's completely unrelated to music?
Good question. Let me think about that for a second. Um,
Because
hmm.
I mean, if I'm like, for one thing, for me, it's like, you know, even the idea of death is something that inspires me, like just to push, and like,
Well, I guess then I guess that's probably sort of the answer because I sort of touched on that a little bit earlier.
yeah, I was kind of wondering if that's where you were,
I mean, yeah, outside of rhythms, melodies, harmonies, and music stuff, um, if we're talking about influences, it would be things like that, like coming to terms with your own sort of mortality. Like, I'm not going to be here forever, so I got to do something cool, you
unless
know?
you end up going into the robot or something, into a machine. And there are so many people like, you mentioned Ralph, who's no longer, God rest his soul, and even John Thomas, who, that's where I, rest his soul as well. If you could put together a band
Mm.
of anyone who's, that they could be deceased or they could be alive. It's could be any number of people you want, like up to five people or something. Who do you think you would ask? And you have total freedom to play a concert, but not at Madison Square Garden because
So I'm in the band and I pick the people I'm playing
yeah,
with.
you pick. It could be anybody you want.
Hmm, man, I don't know why this is taking me so long. Um, I don't know why, but I think Rachmaninoff would have been pretty cool to
Really?
work with. Yeah. Well, I mean, he's my favorite composer, 100%. Um, well, and a lot of it has to do with just like the emotional depth that he could, reach. Because I mean, I've listened to lots of classical music, and he's one of the guys that goes the deepest with that, in my opinion. But
It will
for
be a
that,
duo. It will be a duo, I suppose, right?
well, I mean, not necessarily. I mean, he could be on piano.
Okay.
um, hmm,
You need a bassist, though, right?
yeah, yeah. I mean, oh man, I don't know. I really don't know. Because these days I don't think it's so much um, players per se. Because I'm actually um, though I do play this instrument here, I'm very much into the world of production and record making these days, and that does involve drumming and everything. And I've got my plans for doing my own things, with the drumming and artistically or whatever. But it's kind of like, okay, let me just try to throw out like a quick list here. And so we'll say Rachmaninoff. Maybe we'll get like, we'll go with Square Pusher, He'll be on bass and like hardware synths or
My
something.
red hot car, right?
Yeah, something like yeah, like that, bringing that vibe to the table.
Whoa.
Um, and then we'll get Metro Boomin on 808s. And oh man, yeah. I guess we'll stop there for now.
No, I think no, that's great. And I you took lessons growing up and you went to Berkeley. Berkeley is so prestigious and stuff, but music education has a lot backwards these days.
Hmm.
Um, for instance, like I don't feel like I really started to improvise until after Berkeley on the instrument. So what do you think is missing from music education that's not there, or at least wasn't there when you went to school that you wished was there?
I think the biggest thing missing, or at least not emphasized in music education, is um, how to navigate the music industry when you get out of that place. Because, yeah, you need to know how to play. Yeah, you need to be good at what you do. But, I'm assuming that most people that go to an institution like that, I'm assuming that most of them want to one day have some kind of career.
Well, it's interesting because like I kind of met a lot of people who they thought that they would graduate college and then like it would just be like everyone would be waiting for them. And I always had the thought like, no, that's never going to be the case. You have to go get it yourself. So,
And that's my point right there is I feel like um, there's a lot of musician-y types, okay? That's what I call them, musician-y types, because
musos.
right, because their heads are so on the music, and I put myself in that category too for a very long time. But the thing is, you can learn and get a head start on that, or you can kind of learn the long way, the hard way, you know? And I feel like there's not enough emphasis on preparing for life as a musician outside of Berkeley or outside of fill in the blank music school. You know, like you, I used to hear the word network all the time. Network, network. Tell me why that's important. I didn't really understand it. I was like, I didn't come here to network. I came here to get awesome at drums. That's what I'm coming here for. So it was very like tunnel vision, but also very naive. And like I could tell you, being at that age at school, yeah, one day I was like, I want to have a career doing this. I'm not coming here just as a pit stop and then going getting some business degree to like do something I hate. No, I went here because I'm trying to create a future,
Right. Mhm.
i.e., a career in music, right? So,
And I remember too, even in, when you moved down to New York, you were like, I don't want to be doing these jazz gigs for $40 and stuff. Like you were aware of it at the time, like
yeah.
in your early 20s, which is like some people like about the financial aspects of things as well. You knew then that that's not sustainable.
Yeah, well, the thing is, like, really quickly on the New York thing, um, I mean, it was a couple of things, but I could boil it down to basically like one term, lifestyle. So once I moved to New York City, I would go to the late night jam sessions. I would go to Smalls. I would go to Fat Cat, which I think it's different now, whatever that's called now. But I'd go there, and there would be lines of drummers waiting to play like one song. So you'd like sign up on a sheet or something, and you'd wait around for like 2 hours, and then you
Yeah.
get up, play like one song. I mean,
Do you think that some people think that that's the way you get your career started as a jazz musician? Like that's what the only thing you can do in a sense?
I actually don't. I don't really know because I've been really out of touch with that scene. for a very long time. I think a lot of
I mean, I never liked that scene personally either. Like, I just kind of, I made my career, if whatever performance that happened on a totally different path because I didn't like that
I,
either.
honestly, I'm not quite sure. I think it's, they just like they want to go and they want to play and um, they want to link up with other musicians maybe, but um, I guess it was a big turnoff for me, not because of that one thing of, well, okay, I gotta wait 2 hours to play. No, that wasn't really it. It was like a combination of things. It was that, it was, I just noticed an overall bitterness with a lot of the musicians. They just seem,
Bitterness.
yeah, they seem to hate their lives. And they seem to be a complaining bunch. Like, yeah, 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 complain, complain. I made $50. I'm like, this is not enjoyable. This
Yeah.
is this is not the vibe I'm into. Music style aside, it was just the culture and the scene was just not a scene I was interested in.
Yeah, I lived in New York for a very short time. I relocated back to Jersey, but it was only about, 6 months or something like that because, it's I didn't like it. But to each is their own. So let's leave it at that. The other thing I wanted to ask you before we wrap up, because this is great stuff. And I want to know, you're so incredible at playing the drums, and we talked about expressing yourself and that you were kind of quiet, and this music helped you get those things out. But let's just say if music didn't exist, how do you think you would express these types of things?
Maybe through visual art, because I mean,
Something in
before,
the arts, though.
yeah, before music, that's what I would spend my hours doing anyway. Sketching, drawing. Um, yeah, I was always kind of in some sort of creative something or other. Um, I think music just allowed me to be a bit more external, if you know what I mean.
Definitely.
Because being more of a quiet, shy personality, you sort of keep to yourself. And drawing is a great activity for people who want to, stay that way. But I think at one point I was like, something's missing from this, because um, even though maybe I was sort of a quiet, shy personality, I feel like there's always this thing where you want to connect with other people, and you can do that through things like painting and drawing, but it's much more like low low key, if you know what I mean.
No, definitely, definitely.
Music music has a unique power to like change people's like state. You know what I mean?
I couldn't agree with you more. It's like something just happens, and we don't have, we were just trying to talk about it in words right now, but this is, there's only so much the word. We're trying to get there as we're speaking about it, but this is great, and and is there anything you want to promote, like in terms of where could people find you?
Well, I'm on social media, Instagram.
MySpace?
Maybe I don't. Maybe it's still around. I'm not sure. Um, but definitely Instagram. Probably YouTube. YouTube is that's kind of my focus. Um,
Beautiful.
Everything else is sort of an offshoot. But the main two would be like YouTube and Instagram.
All right. Well, follow This Is Torch on YouTube, and thanks so much.
Yeah, man.